Okay guys, so this is task 1.27. So on this task, this is an example of the task that is not so clear and has some extensions to it, and then it's not all straight. Uh, I'll show you on how to draw this. Of course, you have to use right angle tool. You have to draw the extensions. But also on this task, you have to switch between the right angle tool and the draw tool. But there are also other ways to draw this task without using those techniques. Okay, so I'm gonna show you the different ways of how to draw this task and also the techniques involved in doing that. Okay, so we're in the actual task. So first of all, you need to draw it based on the clearest edge that you'll see. Okay, so I'm gonna change it again to red. Okay, so I'm using right angle tool right now, and then I just put it straight. Guys, most of the time, I mean some of the time, you really don't see the actual shape of the building, but you have to make do what of you make you need to make uh, do with what you have. Okay, so you have to follow the clear edges that you have, and then from that you could draw the building as long as it's good to look at, and as long as it's good to look at, it's acceptable. Okay, so I'm going to use right angle here. And then okay, so this is the first way that I'm going to teach you. You could use repair here, so it's like that, so it's drawn already. You see that I just use straight angle, and then the parts that I need to draw, I drew it using repair tool. Or you could always like use this way, right angle tool, and then use S, point, point, so S again, and then right angle tool again, which is kinda sloppy actually, if you ask me. S, kinda sloppy, but it still works. Okay, so those are the two ways of drawing it. So you need to um, do your best of what you have, and then you could like draw this part separately. Okay, so that is task 1.27. Okay guys, so this is task 1.39. So on this task, we define boundaries, property boundaries. So this is most common on subdivisions, on houses. So on this task, we cut on boundaries. So sometimes there are buildings that are side by side with other buildings on the next property, so we actually need to cut those. We use right angle tool here, we use cut tool here. So everything that you could possibly cut, you cut on this task, as long as it's reasonable, of course. Um, so okay, let's go to the actual task. Okay, so this is the actual task. As you can see, guys, how do we define boundaries, property boundaries? For example, here are the clear fences, right? Here, it's really clear that this property belongs to this guy. This other property belongs to this guy. It's clear there. Also clear here. Okay, so they do have kind of a short fences, so it's kind of easy for you to identify which property belongs to who. Okay, so what we do here is we trace, of course, the buildings that are easy to trace. You use E. Okay, use E. You could add a point there and then adjust. Instead of using right angle, you could do that. Okay, you can use E here also. Also, this is what I mean. I mean, you could probably draw this. This is what I mean is boundary. Okay, so I'm gonna draw this one, and together with this one. Okay, so I'm gonna draw that one together with this one. Okay, so there is a clear cut here, so I'm going to use F. Okay, point here, make sure that it overlaps, and then T, I use T, cut tool, and then use space. Of course, that is a clear boundary, property boundary. So you need to draw everything, for example, on this one too. Okay, so what I'm gonna do here is right angle. Okay, so you could probably draw it like that, since it's a whole subdivision, so the properties are near each other. Okay, a little cramped or something. See, I'm preparing my cuts for later. What I do is I place this here, so I'm preparing all the cuts that I'm gonna be doing for later. Space. Okay, so okay, so that is okay. So I'm gonna use here. I use T space, and then I use F also here, right angle tool, and then T space. I use T here. See that? T. Okay. And then I'm going to cut this part because it was a mistake. Okay. You see that? Property boundaries. Property boundaries. Okay. So this is a property boundary too. So what I'm going to do is I'm gonna put it straight there. So if I'm gonna cut, it's still straight. Okay. So okay, that's it. S T, and then I use space. Okay, so you can see that it's straight. Okay, it's a property boundary too here. Okay, so this is whole property. There's a boundary here. So this part belongs to this guy. There's also a boundary here. Okay, so this is the property of that guy. Yeah, and then you probably need to cut this depending on the houses. Some they cut it, some doesn't. Okay, so those are property boundaries. For example, another one, last example on this task. Okay, so it has a clear cut here, but also this is a property boundary. This is a car, right? But the property overextends here, so you will have to cut here, and you would notice the color changes. It's kind of whiter here, and then this gray part. So when I press R, you can see the property boundary that's going on there. Okay, so this is his property, this is his property. Okay, so that is how property boundary works. So just always remember that each property has their own houses, so those are kind of separate, needs to be separate. Okay, so that is how you draw the entire task of 1.39. So you have to finish everything that is here. You could probably base it here on this image if you want, but so that is how you draw the task. Okay, so property boundary is very important. Okay, thank you. Okay guys, so this is task 1.31. So in this task, this is kind of a complicated task because you have to use right angle here, you have to use cut, you have to use repair tool, And so there are lots of ways to draw this task, but the most effective way, of course, is to draw as a whole, and then use cut. Okay, so first off, I'm going to show you the task, the actual task. Okay, so this task is not that clear. So what you need to do is find the clearest edge that you could possibly find, and then draw the task as a whole. So from that, okay, look for the clearest edge, and then you can probably draw it as a whole. Okay, it's kind of confusing. Okay, so this is it. I've drawn it as a whole, and then I'm going to use cut. Guys, besides from actually using T, split is like a tool that is like the H. You could switch between tools. So if you're gonna use T here, it's gonna be kind of hard. So what I'm using actually is right angle tool. So from a point, you could use right angle, and then you could see the clear cuts, right? And then I'm gonna press it there, and then I'm going to switch. Before I'm gonna end this, I'm gonna use T. Okay, so from F, I use T just to get that right angle cut, and then I use space. Okay, you see that? That is a perfectly right angle cutting. So that is a way actually. So use F. This is very useful on actual projects. Okay, and then I use T. So that is right angle tool, and then I could cut it. I could actually move it here. Yeah, that's right. So it's more pleasing to look at now, right? And then here, also here, a right angle. See, point to point again. Actually, the training checker is not that strict when it comes to how the task should look like. Just as long as you know the basics, you know the actual way of doing things. For example, that, and then for example F. Okay, so I could use T here. T. Okay, see? Could move it. Okay, so that is actually close to the one that we posted. Okay, so that is how you draw task 1.31. So draw it as a whole and then use cut.